great have all these talks been? Like, wow, I don't think I've ever been to a conference where the standard has been so exceptionally high, consistently. Absolutely wonderful. So I'm really, really honoured to be here. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, talking about my favourite subject, which is blood sugars, food, basically, and menopause. So today we will be exploring why menopause issues seem to be escalating, because they are, really. People are having awful menopauses, or as Jenny said yesterday, I'm having an amazing menopause. Wow. We're going to be looking at the hormonal connections in our body, and we're going to be learning how our blood sugars are foundational in our well-being. And we're going to be giving you, I'm going to be giving you some take-home effective tools. So who am I? Well, apart from Jenny's gym buddy, we've been training together for ages, and we had no idea that, I didn't know that that was Jenny Burrell, and she didn't know that this was me, and it was a hilarious conversation when we went, oh, that's hilarious. So who am I? Well, I'm Claire Snowdon-Darling. I'm the founder of Balanced Wellness, which is Europe's first kinesiology franchise with some clinics on the South Coast. My fabulous franchisees is here. I'm a senior practitioner there. I specialise in menopause and digestion because we've been hearing consistently this weekend, haven't we, how connected they are. I'm the founder of functional kinesiology, which is a very powerful new form of kinesiology, and you're going to be hearing the basics of how that was founded as we go through. So I'll be talking about it later, but a practitioner course launching in 2020, seriously excited about. So I'm the principal and senior lecturer of the College of Functional Kinesiology and the co-creator of IBS Free, which is a medically admired pioneering IBS protocol. I blog for the Huffington Post, and I'm the co-host of the podcast Consciously Healthy, which is available on iTunes and YouTube, and that's with my Balanced Wellness business partner, Laura Knowles, and we're a little bit like the Bert and Ernie of the health world, and neither of us have a filter. So I have been recognised at Heathrow's Arrivals Hall, and it was one of those awkward moments where I went, oh God, is this one talking about sex with my ex? Is that the podcast you know me from? So they're very funny. They're worth checking out. But how I got here wasn't linear. I wasn't meant to be here. I mean, I was, if you look at it karmically, but I really wasn't meant to be here. I originally trained as a theatre director. Theatre was my passion. And I specialised in traumatic brain injuries and mental health, and had my own theatre company for people with learning disabilities. And I loved it. I absolutely loved my career. I loved running that charity. But I got into health and started Balanced Wellness because of my health journey. So Jenny yesterday and her authenticity, well, and Michelle this morning, I have tears in my eyes with gratitude for my health journey. So I was generally unwell in my 20s, a standard history, IBS, migraines, weight issues. This is actually me in 2000, maybe 2001. I experienced horrific birth trauma in 2000. And I was so excited to see that there was going to be a talk on the rise in postnatal PTSD, because when I had it, no one was talking about it. It wasn't a thing. I was left with postpartum psychosis and postnatal depression, but it was the type of psychosis where I couldn't be left alone with my baby because I would have killed her. And I didn't realise that I would have killed her. And the depression was horrific. I just didn't function, and it took another 8 years for me to be diagnosed with PTSD. And it was me having gone to counselling, actually started to get myself on the wellness journey, eating right, exercising, doing those things, when I realised I still couldn't be in a room with my 8-year-old daughter by myself, because my body was in this absolute fear, because it just saw that she tried to kill me. And I didn't love her. In fact, I hated her because she tried to kill me. And I cannot tell you it's taken this long and a lot of therapy to be able to stand up in front of a room full of women, a lot of you who are mothers, and say, I hated my child. And then I realised that she deserved a mum who loved her, and I deserved to know what it felt like to love my daughter. And so we both went on that journey. And it's been long, and it's been hard, and it's also been beautiful. So during that time I had chronic fatigue, which of course we now know was essentially 12 years of adrenal stress. And finally, even despite everything that I was doing, my body gave up, and in 2016, just before my 40th birthday, I was diagnosed with primary ovarian insufficiency, which is essentially premature menopause. Be delighted to know that my daughter and I have the best relationship now. We've always been very honest with each other about our experience. It's made her the most phenomenally deep and wise human being. She is a kick-ass 15-year-old who actually doesn't know anything other than authenticity because of her journey. I'm so deeply proud of her. And yeah, it's now a great story, but the reason I really want to own it is because all the stuff that Jenny was saying yesterday about shame being the lie that people tell us about ourselves, the more we talk about this stuff, the more we allow other people to go through their process and to heal through it. It's so important. And the more we rise and we give other people our truth and our honesty, we give them the opportunity to rise. So yeah, my menopause is amazing. Like really, every single symptom that I could have had, and I know it's because of the 12 years of adrenal issues, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. And the NHS have just, they struggle, particularly when it's a difficult menopause. And this is why it is so important that as wellness and health practitioners, we understand why menopause issues are becoming so bad, because this first line health coaching is absolutely the salvation for women now, because the medical system is often letting us down. I made some notes from yesterday and I just want to check that I picked up on them. Yeah, so the slide that I think Jenny and Michelle had, that midlife grabs you by the shoulders and says, we're not kidding around now, it's time to be authentically yourself. That's definitely what my menopause has done for me. And I realised around the time I was diagnosed, I'd put on 3 stone, I was working about 90 hours a week because I love my job. But it was that proving quality, it was just the old paradigm, really. And I'd got myself very unwell just as I went into menopause again. And this is why Jenny and I were having a conversation on Thursday. This blowtorch that Jenny talks about and how it shines a spotlight on every single part of your life. Wow, that is hard, and it is such a gift. There is such a gift in this menopause. And nothing in my world is the same now. Nothing, not one thing. Work has changed, my relationships have changed. I left my ex-husband. He did say it's only the menopause talking. I said, yeah, but sweetie, that estrogen's not coming back, so this is the view from the hill. True story. So that's me. So what's the current situation? Our menopause symptoms seem to be getting worse, and women are experiencing high levels of depression, fatigue, and exhaustion. And I'm tired but wired, that I just can't go to sleep, I'm really jangly. Headaches and migraines, IBS and digestive issues, weight gain, that perimenopausal weight gain, allergies and intolerances. And Jenny and I were laughing like, you know, what? I now can't eat seafood? Like, what? When did that happen? Weakened immune systems and reactions to HRT. And of course, the medical model's responses have more HRT. But actually, it's the HRT that can be contributing to this issue. But why? Why are they getting worse? Well, our modern lifestyles are making us unwell, so we're going into perimenopause depleted. So we generally have quite sedentary lifestyles, increased technology use, increased stress prior to menopause causing burnout. You know, we are the generation coming through of the women who were expected to have it all. And it's exhausting, and our bodies aren't coping. Poor diets with nutritionally depleted or genetically modified food, and IBS, which stops us absorbing what we need from our food. High carb, low fat diets, oh thanks the 80s. Toxic chemical and pollution overload. This is one of my biggest bugbears. I know that Jenny touched on it yesterday. I'll be talking more about it shortly. The widespread use of contraceptives, antibiotics and antidepressants. Just our bodies are overloaded. So why is it particularly affecting menopause? Well, I'd like to introduce the triangle of hormonal health, which I downloaded while sitting on a beach in Byron Bay and trying to explain to my friend why her diet was and her stress was causing her to be really moody. And I drew in the sand this triangle and then went, wow, that's quite a good way of describing it. So we have got basically on the triangle, we've got our blood sugar hormones in as one leg. We've got stress hormones on the other leg, and on this third leg we've got our female hormones and or immune issues. So when I'm seeing someone clinically, they come in, they don't tend to come in unless they've got diabetes and say, oh, my blood sugars are all over the place. They have no concept that their blood sugars are all over the place. They might be coming in with anxiety, even OCD, they're just a bit generally unconfident, but they don't know their blood sugars are off. They're also not coming in and saying, oh, my stress hormones are all over the place. They're coming in saying, I'm stressed, or I'm coping, I'm doing my best. But they don't come in saying that. They come in saying, I've got endometriosis, I've got PCOS, I've got horrible periods, I'm having a horrible menopause. Or they come in with serious autoimmune conditions. So autoimmune and or cancer. That's why people are coming in, that's the health conditions they're complaining about. Now the problem is, the things on this end feel like a mountain that they can't climb. They just feel like this overwhelming, I don't know what to do about it. And what I love about working in this way is that we can break it down and make it really simple so that they can take action and they feel really empowered that they know what their body is doing. That it's not a fight between them and their body. You'll notice that in the middle of the triangle is IBS, because IBS is the perfect storm of hormonal fallout. So let's start with the stress hormones part of the triangle. So, endocrine 101, I know we all probably know this, but basically we have the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands, so our hypothalamus, central nervous system receiving and giving messages, and the pituitary gland obviously running the whole of the endocrine and also the orchestra of the endocrine. So it's receiving the chemical messages, the hormone messages, and it's also giving them. Got the thyroid gland, which of course we know is so hugely important, pineal gland for light and dark sensitivity, so our circadian rhythms, melatonin, serotonin. Thyroid gland, of course, metabolism, weight, all of the stuff that we were talking about yesterday. The thymus, which is involved in our immunity. Our pancreas, which we tend to think of more as an endocrine gland, but actually is more involved in digestion. Which is very, very interesting, because when we get onto blood sugars later, and in case I forget to say it because, menofog, what's so interesting is when people's blood sugars are unstable and the pancreas, 95% of the pancreas's job should be digestion. Only 5% of its job should be dealing with insulin. And yet, our blood sugars are unstable, so it's having to get really, really busy over here doing that job instead. And then it gets tired. And Michelle was saying yesterday about how we now have so much evidence that says that people who give up drinking milk, that doesn't contribute to osteoporosis. That's not a factor. In fact, a bigger factor is this issue with the pancreas, where it's more involved in this endocrine function of the insulin than digestion, because it's supposed to break down fat to pull vitamin D3 out of it. And actually, when it's not doing that job, that's when we're seeing fractures. So again, balancing these blood sugars. So it's interesting that it's often the little old ladies who have been sat in their nursing home drinking sweet tea, then they have a fall and they sort of crack their pelvis. But actually, it's often this pancreas involvement. So then we also have our adrenal glands. We're going to be talking a little bit about them because they're my favourite bad boys. And then obviously the testes and the ovaries. And so we're supposed to have this lovely communication from the pituitary gland to all the other glands, and they're all supposed to get on and do their jobs. Except they often can't, because we are too busy having to deal with stress hormones. So the hormones that I'm talking about, the stress hormones, are adrenaline, the fight or flight messenger, which raises our heart rate, shortens the breath, and it tells the hypothalamus, our central nervous system, that we're under attack. And then, when we're under attack, the body goes, oh, I'm going to need more to get me out of this. If there's a bunch of saber-toothed tigers behind me, I'm going to need some energy to get away from it. So cortisol it dumps sugar into the muscles so they have energy to respond. Now, the interesting thing is that adrenaline is very inflammatory. We really don't want very much of it, and particularly not all the time. It's very inflammatory. Cortisol, of course, is an anti-inflammatory, so that sounds good, right? Except it's not, because an anti-inflammatory constantly being in our body actually slows wound healing. We don't want sugar constantly being dumped in our muscles. We don't want slow wound healing. You know, our bowels work by a peristaltic motion. We don't want that not peristaltic in. I don't even know what that verb is. We don't want to interfere with the peristalsis. That's the better English. So yeah, adrenaline and cortisol are huge, huge problems. And the problem is that living in 2019 is highly stressful. So when people go, oh no, I'm not stressed, I go, really? In your cave? How are you not stressed? Because, you know, we wake up with alarm clocks, caffeine, toxic chemicals, time pressure, family pressure, work pressure, social pressure, outgassing from furnitures and, you know, all the manufactured things, pollution, pesticides, bad diets, technology, heating and aircon, electric lighting, financial concerns, health concerns, etc., etc., etc. So from the moment we wake up in the morning, our body thinks it's under attack. So it has no choice but to respond with adrenaline and cortisol. So people who say, I thrive on stress, it's like, yeah, until your adrenals fall over. You don't, actually. You've just been programmed to think you thrive on stress. I had no idea what that concept meant, because I was like a total type A bred. I'm going to build a house whilst my child's this age, and I'm going to run this business, I'm going to do that, it's going to be great, I'm going to do this, and then we'll have this party. I had absolutely no concept that that actually was the sign of someone in such deep levels of cortisol toxicity that I was making the decisions from the cortisol toxicity. And I know someone was talking about that yesterday in one of their talks. Fascinating, and you can see it in your clients. You can see when people are making decisions from stress, because cortisol just wants to make itself again and again. We become adrenaline junkies. So HPA axis dysregulation, I know some of the other talks have touched on it, and this is what I love actually, is because you're starting to get these take-home messages over and over and over again. So it's not an anomaly. So what happens is when the hypothalamus gets this message that we're under attack, the hypothalamus and the pituitary send a memo to the adrenals and say, hey guys, make that cortisol stuff. And the adrenals make the cortisol, and then they send a message back saying, stop sending me the memo, I've done it. Except the problem is, that memo was sent 20 minutes ago, and now there's another thing that's come along. So then they're sending the next memo, and the next memo. And what happens is this feedback loop from the adrenals saying, stop sending the memo, I've got it, actually gets shut off. It's like there's so much white noise that it gets kind of completely lost. So HPA axis dysregulation is when that message has been, that negative feedback loop has been switched off, and we're just now in this state of constantly pumping out those stress hormones. So I'm about to come on to female hormones, but this is actually, we've heard again a few times about the pregnenolone steal. And you know, if you've heard this quite a lot this weekend, or you've heard this at other conferences, and it might start to seem a bit blah to you, please, please go out there and scream it from the rooftops, because it's not blah. People don't know about this. They don't know, and they don't understand, so they don't understand why they're getting unwell. I actually had to have a conversation with my GP about this when she was trying to say, you don't need progesterone, you only need estrogen. Shall we talk about how our body makes hormones? The science is there. This is really cutting edge stuff. So please don't assume that your clients know, tell them. So we have our adrenal glands that create cholesterol, and from cholesterol we create pregnenolone. And I know Michelle was talking about pregnenolone yesterday. And pregnenolone then makes progesterone, unless there is stress applied, because progesterone, the progestation hormone, is to help us create the environment to hold and carry a baby, If we've got saber-toothed tigers behind us, the last thing we're going to want is to be pregnant. So the body will make cortisol instead of the progesterone. So we have got a situation where we have got hundreds, thousands, millions of women in progesterone deficiency way before they even go into perimenopause. So when you look back at my health history, massive birth trauma, nearly died, went straight into HPA axis dysregulation, scarred adrenals. So I didn't make any progesterone basically from 2001. None. So spotting in my 30s, spotting period issues, weight gain, I was really stressed. But there was medically no answer to this because no one was looking at this. So actually, it's then that we can start to act with our flaxseed muffins, diet, nutrition, stress, take that away. In the really extreme, the slightly more extreme cases, we might be looking at bioidentical pregnenolone. In the much more extreme cases, we're going to be looking at bioidentical progesterone. But we've got to be looking at eliminating the cortisol too. This is big stuff, and I tell you, when you explain it to women, they go, oh yeah, it makes sense. This makes sense to me. And all of a sudden, their period problems aren't, it makes sense. It's not their body doing something, they don't know what's going on. So let's talk about female hormones. We all know that one, right? So in menopause, this is what happens to our hormones. So estrogen is our exciter hormone. It's a get up, get going hormone. It's our ovulator, it's for healthy weight, energy, libido, mood, it protects our heart. Lovely, love that. Progesterone, calming, holds the baby. It's fertility, it's our cycle regulator, it's our mood and bloating. And then testosterone is another exciter and is libido, energy, and hair. So these are our three main hormones that are causing, helping our mood stability and everything else. But as you can see, as we come into, so this is, normal, and we come into perimenopause, estrogen starts to become a little bit dominant, progesterone drops off, and estrogen then goes on its cray-cray roller coaster, which is so interesting to watch. And this is where the problems start, because we have these hormone fluctuations. So the estrogen fluctuations cause loads of issues, but including itching. And actually, itching doesn't cut it. Anyone who's experienced it? Because I know I've woken up with my fingernails bedded into my scalp where I was itching so badly, it actually hurt. I was taking painkillers for the itching. I was like, and it just came on one day out of the blue. I was like, wow, what is this? Weight gain, and that, again, it's like 3 kilos in a week, bam, there you go. Bloating. So the term estrogen dominance, you've heard that a lot this weekend, is actually a misnomer, because what it really means is progesterone deficiency. Now, interestingly, so I've said that it's estrogen fluctuations that cause that. It's too much estrogen. So too much estrogen, terrible. There are no known medical implications for having too much progesterone. That was by the Society of Endocrinology. So doesn't it make you start to think, why are we focusing on estrogen in menopause? Why? So here's where part of the problem is with HRT. Progesterone is very beneficial for cardiovascular health, stimulates hair growth, calms mood, promotes sleep for that meno-insomnia, prevents breast cancer. So progesterone, great, Except then in the synthetic HRT, we're not getting progesterone, we're getting a synthetic version called progestin, or levonorgestrel. I can never say that, levonorgestrel. So progestin is this synthetic version. And progestin increases the risk of fatal blood clots, can actually cause hair loss because of its similarity to testosterone. And actually when you look here chemically, the synthetic progestin and testosterone are almost exact. May cause anxiety and depression, increases the risk of breast cancer, and it's in the Mirena coil and all of the combined HRT pills. Now when we've got women who are, let's go back here, if we've got testosterone exciter, estrogen exciter, progesterone calming, if we've now got progestin exciter, wow, what's happening to our bodies? Wow, we've just got women, like I have had women crawling into my clinic, literally twitching. I just don't know what's wrong with me. I'm like, yeah, I do, yeah. And of course, after the ovaries stop producing our hormones, it's our adrenal glands that take over. So if our adrenal glands are just exhausted and broken, how are they going to do this job at all? They can't. And then adding the progestin, we're now just compounding the issue because we've got a body that is wired, and what's our response to being wired? More stress hormones. Oh, either way. But HRT is not the devil. I completely agree with everything that Michelle was just saying about the localized estrogen, the one that doesn't go systemically, fantastic. And it's so necessary, but in my experience, in the latter stages of menopause. So I've now been perimenopause for about 20 years, it feels. But actually, I think I'm just in the process of missing like my 8th bleed in a row. So the peri bit was hideous. I'm now in that bit. Still not in the place where my bloods are showing that I need any estrogen. My estrogen levels are still holding. That's how much I had estrogen dominance. So you'd be thinking by now, oh, she should need the estrogen. Nope, still experiencing estrogen dominance, despite taking lots and lots of bioidentical progesterone. So I find it's in the very latter stages of menopause with the things like the vaginal dryness, the soreness with penetration, that real teariness. That's when women are really needing the estrogens. So it's not always necessary in the fluctuation time and needs balancing with the natural progesterones, obviously. The medical approach of using estradiol can be helpful. We have many different forms of estrogen, but actually combining that with estriol, which is much, much more gentle on the body. We're not meant to have the active form of estrogen postmenopausally. So again, that doesn't make sense to me. Just give your body what it's supposed to have and probably hasn't been making. So now let's move on to the immune connection, because this is where quite a lot of the menopause symptoms are coming from. So histamine. So histamine causes necessary inflammation at times of healing. Interestingly, elevated estrogen levels induce histamine release and slows down the regulating enzyme, DAO, diamine oxidase, in the gut, which means that we can't reabsorb it. So it's needed to clear histamine. So this, me waking up with my fingers embedded in my scalp and then suddenly waking up and going, wow, that's interesting eczema around my eyes that I've never had before. This is all a lovely histamine response, or as Jenny and I were saying, what, now I can't eat seafood? This is all histamine, 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 and it's a sign of estrogen imbalance. And that estrogen imbalance not only is to do with the fluctuations, it is to do with that gut health that Michelle was just talking about. Always comes back down to the poop, always. So when we've got women who are from puberty experiencing IBS, which was definitely a generational thing. I know that IBS was very rare when I got diagnosed at 15, but it's now become so commonplace that, oh yeah, well, as soon as you're bleeding, yeah, of course you've got IBS, and it's because of diets and processed food and stress. But women aren't going to be going through a decent perimenopause because they have not got the gut health to support what's needed to clear the hormones. So let's talk about the blood sugar hormones. So we have 5 main blood sugar hormones. We have insulin and glucagon, and these do opposite jobs. So when you've got high blood sugar, you produce insulin. This lowers blood sugar and creates fat storage. Fat storage, that's the key. Insulin, fat storage. When we've got low blood sugar, we produce glucagon, which tells the liver to convert any stored glycogen back into glucose for energy. Yeah? So one's going to get it out of our cells and make more energy, and insulin is going to lower the blood sugar but store as fat. We go into fat storage. I want you to remember the word storage. Then we have ghrelin, which I like to call gremlin. That's the hunger hormone. And so once we eat, it stops being released, and then it starts to be released, and about 3 hours later we go, I'm hungry again. We have cholecystokinin, CCK, which is the satisfaction hormone. Now, this is where we get into how high carb diets really affect our blood sugars, because high carbohydrate consumption causes a CCK resistance, and that actually means that we want to eat more food. So it's a huge factor in type 2 obesity and type 2 diabetes. So people just talking about insulin, it's so naive. We have got to be taking into consideration these much more lesser known hormones. CCK also plays a role in anxiety disorders. So when I'm talking about blood sugars and anxiety, that's the beast. So leptin is long-term energy regulation. It turns the glycogen into your glucose, which in turn fuels our cells and muscles. And it reduces appetites and cravings. It's very sensitive to starchy carbs. Too much leptin increases inflammation and immune issues. So already you're seeing the connection on our lovely triangle. Now I say to people, when you start balancing your blood sugars, I'm going to talk about how we do that, it's going to take 5 days for you to get these beasts under control. 5 days. You're going to be hungry, you're going to be grumpy, but we are retraining your body. And after 5 days, the world is going to seem like a much better place. But what we're doing is we are sending these hormones to their room and we are making them tidy it. So what happens when we have this blood sugar instability? So we're waking up in the morning and our blood sugars are low. And then we might be eating something like porridge or granola or a banana bread muffin from Starbucks with a coffee on the way to work. And what happens is our blood sugars spike. And when they spike, we have to produce insulin. And then our blood sugars don't go back to where they should be. The amount of insulin was to get us out of the crisis that we were in and how high we went. So now the body's produced that much insulin, our blood sugars drop this much, which is usually then when we go, oh, I'm a bit peckish or I just feel a bit sketchy, let me grab a sweet treat. And then our blood sugars rise. So what happens to initiate that sweet treat is we have to produce cortisol. So the body's going, well, I haven't got enough sugar, so I'm going to release cortisol to dump some sugar in my muscles, which will also give me the energy to get up and go and get some chocolate. The other interesting thing that happens is we have got 3 brains. And one of our brains, our reptilian brain, there is no higher brain function in our reptilian brain. As soon as our blood sugars drop below a certain level and we are in the realm of producing cortisol, our reptilian brain takes over, our higher brain function shuts down, and we do not make good food choices. So that is why we do not go to the supermarket hungry, because you will just be buying all the chocolate. Not going, I need some slow release carbs and I need some protein, definitely, that's going to take an hour to cook. That's not what we're thinking. So by creating stable blood sugars, we can actually change our decision-making process. So we end up in this roller coaster all day. And if we've already got serious issues with weight, insulin fat storage, we could be peaking and going into fat storage 15 times a day, 4 times a day. We don't want to be doing that. And we don't want to be releasing cortisol all day. We just want this nice green wavy line. I actually dated someone for 6 months who had type 1 diabetes, and he had one of the little nubbins on his arm where he could read it rather than do blood tests. He was a brilliant guinea pig. Like, I was like, right, you're going to eat everything I tell you to eat for the next few hours. But genuinely, what was fascinating was he halved his use of insulin. Halved it. Because we don't actually, if we eat correctly, we don't need to use much insulin when it comes to eating. We need background insulin, which is what he injected morning and night. But actually that reactive insulin, our bodies don't need to use it if we eat right. when we're on that blood sugar roller coaster, these are the symptoms. So when I get a client coming in with any of this, I'm going, it's blood sugars. That is a big list. And some stuff that we just really wouldn't think about. So particularly, people don't think about anxiety or allergies as blood sugar instability, but they are. So going back to the theme of this weekend, how can we be authentically ourselves if we're anxious, if we're forgetful, if we're making clouded judgments? That's not a way to authentic living. How do we have the courage to stand up and go, yeah, this is me and all my wacky-doodleness, here I am, when actually we're hungry and we're angry and we're anxious? We can't. So absolutely, maintaining our blood sugars is the way for us to be who we are. So let's have a look at the triangle hormonal interplay and see how they all geniusly feed each other. So let's start with the female hormones and the immune. Well, estrogen and histamine have a huge connection. Estrogen stimulates mast cells to make more histamine and downregulates that DAO enzyme we were talking about. At the same time, histamine stimulates the ovaries to make more estrogen, creating a vicious cycle of histamine, estrogen, histamine, estrogen. And at the time of perimenopause, when the ovaries are still doing that, this is when we're seeing the serious allergies, the serious weight gain, spotting, all of that stuff. So the blood sugar and stress connection. Well, cortisol and insulin are opposing. So cortisol floods our body with glucose to give our muscles the energy to respond. It also renders insulin useless. It makes us insulin resistant. So insulin resistance is when we're not using the insulin that's our bodies are being flooded with. It doesn't matter how much insulin we produce, it's not actually drawing the sugar out of our cells and reducing our blood sugars, because the cortisol is trying to get the blood sugars or the sugar into our cells. Cortisol makes us crave high-calorie foods to replenish the stores. And as I said, causes us to be flooded with blood glucose and resistant to the insulin. How confused is our bodies? I mean, how confusing is that message all day, every day with that blood sugar roller coaster? So confusing. So blood sugars and immune, or histamine and insulin, that's the connection. Increased glucose causes mast cell degranulation, which is actually them doing their job, which increases histamine production. So histamine intolerance, which is when we've got too much histamine, is due to not enough of this DAO enzyme that I was talking about. And this blood sugar instability also lowers the level of DAO. So if we've got bad gut function and we've got this blood sugar instability, we're just going to be histamine central. Like, no wonder autoimmune diseases are now at epidemic level, and no wonder. And elevated histamine then elevates our blood glucose levels, which means we're now going to have to get insulin back involved. And around we go. So the blood sugar hormones and female hormones. So estrogen and progesterone and insulin. Increased estrogen causes insulin sensitivity. So the sensitivity is how well are we using it? Low estrogen causes insulin resistance. So what we don't want is this happening. You know, estrogen's already doing this. We don't want now this confusion with insulin. So how do we deal with that? We stop our requirement for overuse of insulin. Yeah? And female hormones and stress. Well, we've already covered that because that's the pregnenolone steal. I mean, how many people do you know battling this stuff all the time? All the time. And this is where beasting yourself in the gym, going for a run, isn't going to cut it. It's going to actually start contributing to the flogging of the dead horse. This is where we have to learn how to be really mindful. And it's when, you know, as health professionals, saying to perimenopausal woman, Well, you've put on that 3 kilos because clearly you've been eating excess. Track your macros. It doesn't matter about my macros. I've got this going on in my body. I need to deal with this before I can deal with weight. So a little side note, IBS is the perfect storm of hormone dysregulation. So start from the top, we have blood sugar instability. So when we have blood sugar instability, we know we end up with high insulin. And when we have high insulin, the other thing that happens is it reduces the motilin, which is the hormone that creates motility in the small intestine. That in itself, the blood sugar instability, makes us release more adrenaline and cortisol, which switches us from the parasympathetic nervous system into the sympathetic nervous system, so we have reduced enzyme production, so we can't even break down our food. This is where we then have a connection with the ileocecal valve as well, where the ileocecal valve starts to play up, and this is where we start to see IBS, either constipation or diarrhea. Once that's all happening, we then get low progesterone, because of the pregnenolone steal, high estrogen. That little combo boosts serotonin, which gets stuck in the gut, which causes pain. So now we've got increased sensitivity, which in turn elevates our histamine and inflammation, which in turn creates food intolerance. And at this point, with all of this going on, our liver becomes overwhelmed, can't cope, has to go and dump estrogen, cortisol, and serotonin in the bowel. All of that causes IBS, which creates erratic eating, which puts us back into blood sugar instability. Interesting, isn't it? See it all come together. And yet, the reason I love working this way so much is because I know it feels like, it felt like I was in a dark forest with no way out. And so yes, there's a lot of technical information, but actually when we can explain it to our clients and the people that need our help, you can go, I know what's going on here, and here are the breadcrumbs. Let's get you out of that dark forest. So there are the top 34 symptoms of menopause, and I thought it'd be quite fun to list, when they come into my clinic, what hormone imbalance I put them under. So estrogen and progesterone, the hot flushes, missing periods, bloating, hair loss on thinning. Oh, I did change the slide yesterday, but they didn't change it on here. I see the doubling bit. Burning tongue, breast pain, brittle nails, sleep disorders and insomnia, definitely low progesterone, body odour change, osteoporosis. Now, yes, HRT, etc., but bioidentical HRT, but we can't really do much about that. The body's going to have to go through that process in menopause. That's the nature of the beast. But what we can do things about are all of these. So the histamine, that's where we get our night sweats, allergies, itchy skin, headaches, digestive issues, dizziness, and the menofog. Insulin, the weight gain, mood swings, tingling extremities, panic disorder and anxiety, and adrenaline and cortisol, the fatigue, the loss of libido, the joint pain, electric shock sensation, UTI, the incontinence, muscle tension, irregular heartbeat, and depression. So if you're having all 34 of those symptoms, wouldn't it be nice to be able to take away at least a big stack of them quite effortlessly and easily? Amazing. So, why focus on blood sugar? Well, it's the easy fix, actually. The other bit, your body's going to have to do what it has to do during menopause. You can control it, and then you can control your stress. That's actually our jobs as well, as practitioners, is to, like as Jenny said yesterday, get someone to sit there with a plate and go, what's on your plate? They're not the overnight fix, the stress hormones, but they're definitely fixable. We have 21 opportunities a week, we eat 3 times a day, to balance them. It can be quick. So my experience is when we start to get blood sugars right, 2 weeks. I say you'll notice a difference in 2 weeks. And if not, then we're going to be looking at some of that really deep underlying stress. It's the foundation for everything. And it's so empowering because it's just so easy for someone to go, yes, I can take control of that. This is how I'm going to start helping myself walk out of the forest. And if we control our blood sugars whilst we have stress, because this is the problem, isn't it? Is we get, oh, I'm too busy, I got too busy, and then I just had a packet of crisps. No, this is where we need to change our mindset of, I'm stressed, now I really need to create that solid scaffolding for my body. And like Jenny was saying yesterday, you don't have a choice now because your body's falling over. You don't have a choice. We don't have the opportunity for those excuses anymore. Well, you can have the excuses, but you are going to wake up with your fingernails buried in your head, and you are going to wake up constantly throughout the night with hot sweats. It's not pleasant. And I also am a really big believer that when we get the biochemistry right, that's when we can deal with emotional stuff. And if menopause is going to be shining a spotlight on a lot of the stuff we're going to have to deal with in our life, and often by menopause, it's when we've got the teenage children, it's when we might be looking at our ex-husbands and going, yeah, I'm done. We need that emotional clarity and courage to be able to deal with what life is throwing at us. And we're only going to be able to do that if we've got the biochemistry in place. So how do we balance our blood sugars? Because the medical model would say, well, you just snack. And it doesn't really matter what you snack on. And that is absolutely not true. So, back in the day, studying nutrition, we would be told you needed to eat however many grams of protein a day, you need to eat however many grams of carbs, however many bits of fat, and it kind of didn't really matter in what order you have them, provided that you get them all in the day. It doesn't actually make any sense, because if we have a hormonal response every single time we put something in our mouth, we want that hormonal response to be one that is getting us back to the place of wellness and not back into the place of these symptoms. So that means every time we eat, we need to be eating food that gives us the correct hormonal response. The glucagons, the reducing the histamines, the reducing the cortisol, not going straight into insulin. So we eat a balanced diet. Yeah, it's really easy to say, isn't it? But what does that even mean? Because people say, well, what's a healthy diet? And I go, what are you trying to achieve? But in this instance, we eat something that we like to call PFC, because we focus on the 3 macronutrients. So protein, our enzymes, our hormones, our building blocks. This is what protein gives us. It's energy. So when I get people coming in, and I'm really, I don't have an issue with the vegan diet, but as I think it was Jenny saying it still, maybe the Dr. Susan, it's not about, it's more about what does your body need right now? What does it need right now to get you back to a place of wellness? So a lot of people are coming in protein deficient, and not just vegans, but vegetarianism, or just I'm eating granola for breakfast and then I'm having a cheese sandwich, but protein deficient, really protein deficient. And the body is requiring more from us at this phase of life. Plus, if we have IBS, we actually need about 40% more protein because we're not breaking it down, and because of the increased inflammation. We need fats for blood sugars, for liver, for energy storing, for temperature, for hormone creation, and exactly as Jenny was saying yesterday, we struggle with fats in menopause because of the overwhelm in the liver. So this whole putting butter in your coffee, let's just keep on smothering ourselves in coconut oil, not actually going to work. So we need to be very careful with the ratio of fats that we're having. And then we have carbohydrates. That's our energy, fuel, fiber, serotonin production, and phytonutrients. Carbohydrates are our friends. We need them. It's just which carbohydrates and in what ratio. So it is about eating them at the right ratio at every meal, but I'm certainly not an advocate of people weighing food or who can be bothered. I want to be able to go into a co-op because I'm running around and know I can grab some protein, grab some fats, grab the right carbohydrates and be gone. I don't want to have to be sitting there measuring it, weighing it, etc. So we work with this plan, which is called the PFC plan, which basically says, here's your list of proteins. So yes, kale, quinoa, cheese, nuts have a lot of protein in them. But when we are in a state of illness, unwellness, it's not enough, and it's not enough in the right ratio. So our protein sources become the meats, fish, cottage cheese, because it's actually completely, what's the word I'm looking for? Fat's been eliminated, it's just protein. Eggs, tofu, and actually protein powders can be a get out jail-free card. Clean protein powders. I completely agree with Jenny yesterday, where a lot of meat is dirty, absolutely. So educating people on organic grass-reared where they can. And when we're going through this plan, I also completely agree with not dairy for gut issues or menopause. It's only on there because this is a standard plan that I use in my clinic where I've got people with all sorts of different conditions. So our fat sources are our nuts and seeds. Again, we're going to ignore the cheese and milk and cream. But some people are actually okay with things like goat's casein, goat's lactose, coconut oils, coconut creams, coconut milks, organic mayonnaise, olive oil, olives, nut butters, butter, bone stock jelly we were talking about yesterday, avocado, lard and tallow. So this is like the old way of eating. But it's not very much, so it's a 10 gram serving. So it's like it's a teaspoon of olive oil, a couple of seeds, or half an avocado with your eggs for breakfast. Yeah? This whole thing of walloping as much fat as you possibly can, not in menopause because of the liver. I also find that menopausal women are better without too much saturated fat, so also being careful with the nuts, being better with seeds, as we were talking about yesterday, and olive oil. Then we come on to carbohydrate. This is where it gets interesting, because firstly we have our non-starchy vegetables. It's a non-exhaustive list, but our non-starchy vegetables are our cruciferous vegetables, our salads, our greens, our leafies, our cauliflowers, all of that really good stuff, our bean sprouts. We can eat those abundantly, and we need that fibre for that good gut health. So this actually goes a little bit against FODMAP, because FODMAP often says reduce your fibre. No, 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 up your fibre, up your fibre. So that we eat abundantly. The ratios I'm talking about come down to selecting one starchy carbohydrate for each meal. Now our starchy carbohydrates are either our grains and beans, and again I agree with yesterday, I really avoid grains for people with any kind of inflammatory response, and particularly wheat, absolutely 100%. Fruit, starchy root veg, and our others, which is the treats, which is where all the fun in the world lives. So our alcohols, etc. What I love about this plan is that nothing is forbidden. It's like, well, okay, well, how do I make it fit? So, I went out for a lovely dinner last night, and I had some monkfish, and I had that with, a hollandaise sauce, which was lovely. That was my fat. And then we had that with broccoli, because, you know, broccoli obsession always, if you're menopausal, and some green beans. And didn't have any potato, but did have a very nice glass of wine. That was my starchy carbohydrate. So it's a case of, you could be having your couple of eggs cooked up in some butter with half an avocado or some seeds for breakfast, have with that some kale, some mushrooms, some tomatoes, and then is it a day where I'm going to want either a couple of rice cakes, or am I going to want a bit of fruit, my berries, because I know they're good for me in menopause. But I'm not going to have both, because now I'm spiking my blood sugars. Because any of this stuff, even if it's slow release carbs, any of it is just going to turn to sugar as soon as it gets into the bowel. So this is how we start to regulate the weight issues in menopause. We're also not spiking our blood sugars, so we're not going into cortisol issues. We're not actually using that much insulin. So we can have more carbs, it actually says it on the instructions, we just have to offset it with more fat. So if you go, well, I'm not going to have one glass of wine, I'm going to really want two, and that's my limit because then hot flushes start, okay, have that with a couple of olives, have that with a couple of nuts. You know, we used to know this. Your granny would have given you cream to put on your tinned peaches, or cream on your cake, or we had cheese and wine parties. Then the 80s came along and we started saying, oh, we'll have the cake but hold the cream. Like, we've just forgotten. You know, bread and dripping, not that I'm advocating bread, but we knew this. We knew that inherently sort of understood that fats offset the effect of carbs. When we're eating carbs by themselves, so a packet of crisps or just a drink by itself, or a fizzy drink, God forbid, I call them unsupported carbs. It's like, imagine a helium balloon of blood sugars in your body, which then the only way to weigh that down is insulin. So by creating this structure, this biochemical scaffolding, we're actually stopping our body going into that hormonal fallout. And it becomes quite interesting when people start saying, oh yeah, well, but you see, I'd have a risotto. And I go, well, the serving size is half a cup. Are you having half a cup? Probably having 1.5 cups. That's 3 portions of carbs. And then what are you having with it? Well, I love that with sweet potato and pumpkin. Right, so now you're having, that's 5 portions of carbs. Oh, yeah, and I might have a glass of wine, that's 6 portions of carbs. Well, I do cook it in some, cream or in some olive oil. Okay, so now you've got your fats, where's your protein? Where's your protein? Oh, I don't have any. Okay, which is why I say that for some people, particularly vegans or vegetarians, clean protein powders are a get out of jail free card. I've got a client who's a teenage girl, has chosen to be vegan, is a very, very fussy eater. And I'm like going, make your own vegan mayonnaise, they do that, but add in protein powders. Make your own tomato ketchup, add in protein powders. Whatever you will eat, just pimp it out with your protein powder. You can have your porridge in a smaller portion. Extra fats, pimp it out with almond butter. Pimp it out with your protein powder. Up your protein and the fats. Don't have the carbs unsupported. So this leads us to become a food label reader. We start wanting to know, so for example, where does hummus fit in this? Where does yogurt fit? Not that we're eating yogurt if we've got that gut issue though, but where does hummus fit? And I go, oh, well that's interesting, read the back of the packet. Because it'll either be a carb, because it'll be higher in chickpeas, or it'll be higher in olive oil and therefore a fat. Yeah? So the top foods to avoid to stop this: wheat, milk, sugar and processed foods. I mean, we kind of all know that now, right? But what else can we do? Because we're wellness coaches. It's not just about food. And we've got people with anxiety and we've got people with issues. Well, review HRT. So avoiding the progestins and opting for the natural progesterones such as the eutrogestin. And I'm always encouraging my clients to either beg their GP for a blood test to see where their estrogen's at, or you can actually, like with the testing outside, the functional testing options, we use a couple in our clinics, to see where their estrogens are and therefore decide whether or not estrogen is relevant. Exercise, of course, because this is how we're going to get insulin out of our muscles, it's how we get our estrogen out of the muscles, it's how we get the better bowel function, it's how everything starts to improve. But the right exercise and at the right time of the day. So doing a really intensive spin class at 7 p.m. when you are on your knees with cortisol and stress hormones is probably the worst thing you can do. My business partner is she's like Barbie. She's got this tiny little body, so much so that I've always laughed that I don't even know how she fits in her internal organs. And she's just one of those people that's got like sticks for arms, and she'll go, I'm going to do some hard exercise, and she does a bit of yoga. And she took up CrossFit. And she took up CrossFit in the evening at a time where we had huge amounts of stress in our business. And she started coming, and her sister just got tinier and tinier and was just like all fabulous and CrossFitted up. And my business partner was coming in going, I can't do it on my trousers. And she was like, must be muscle gain, it must be muscle gain. And I'm looking going, wow, that's a muffin top. I've never seen you with a muffin top. And actually what she realised was because of the amount of stress that she was under, she'd taken up this hard, high impact exercise, which, I do that in the morning, great, love it, it's excellent for my body. But it was the wrong time of day and she was flogging a dead horse and the cortisol created a muffin top. She stopped, a week later, muffin top gone, she was back in her size, whatever they are, tiny little jeans. But it was such a great teaching tool because it just showed me just exercise at the right time of the day and make sure it's suitable for the time of day. And I know that when I was in the depths of my perimenopause and chronic fatigue, I've got a great training team, of course, 'cause that's where I met Jenny. And I remember I was just going in one day and I dragged myself there, and it wasn't even particularly early, it was like 8:30, and I had a step, and all I had to do was a step up. And I remember just looking at that step and going, I can't do it, and actually bursting into tears going, I am so tired, I can't do it. But I was piling on weight and I was like, I've got to exercise. If I'd have known any of this, I'd have been going, right, sacking that off, going for a swim, or not doing anything today, a bit of yoga, a bit of stretching, a bit of chilling out. Get good sleep, we've been talking about sleep, and that's hilarious when you've got menopause insomnia. That's been my worst symptom. So a really good way to get good sleep is a bedtime snack. So we don't have protein at bedtime, we would have a fat and carb. So that might be an oat cake with a bit of butter, half an apple sautéed up in butter with some cinnamon, half a banana with a bit of almond butter. If you want something savoury, a little bit of broccoli with some coconut oil on it. Any carb and any fat. About 20 minutes before bed, so it's literally you eat, clean your teeth, go to bed. Journal your worries before bedtime, because that menopause insomnia is so bizarre. Because you'll be like, right, I'm ready for bed, I'm so tired, and your head will hit the pillow and then it's stuff, song lyrics, God knows. But actually just journaling starts the process of telling your body, we're stopping now. Going to bed by 10 p.m. Because even if you can't sleep, being able to deeply rest and just get into that kind of trance-like state, and sleep in a very dark room, so with no lights. I travel, actually I forgot to take them off this morning as well, I travel with electrical tape, like black electrical tape, because of the little dots on the tellies or on fire alarms. Oh my God, because they really stimulate your pineal gland, and they'll stop your pineal gland from making the melatonin that it needs. So I travel with this electrical tape and stick it on things, and it's quite funny if anyone I'm with wants to put on the television, because they're like, well, this remote not working, my electrical tape on the telly. But I'm so light intolerant, I've become more light intolerant through my menopause. So it does actually show how those things, or those LED alarm clocks, or your phone kind of being on charging, but there's a light coming from it, terrible, really terrible for your pineal gland. Cut out the EDC nasties. So I know Jenny was talking about these yesterday, but that's our parabens, our phthalates, our sodium lauryl sulfates, which are also destroying the orangutan's rainforest, so let's definitely cut them out. Toluene, propylene glycol, and perfume. EDC is actually a genre of chemicals, and EDC stands for endocrine disruptor chemicals. We don't want those. In fact, that the paraben issue became so big that I know that IKEA eliminated them, I think it was from about 2 years ago, they eliminated them in all their flat pack furniture because of the outgassing and how we've got so much information now on how it disrupts the endocrine. Absolutely shocking. I tell you, one of the best books I have ever read is a book called Not Just a Pretty Face by Stacey Malcolm, and she created, I can't remember the full name of it, but it was a database, the first database of safe products. Which meant that she had to create the database of unsafe products. And in this book, they talk about how children, so women who are using huge amounts of product, because women can actually use up to 100 products in a day. When you start thinking about your eyeshadow and your mascara and your deodorant and your toothpaste and this and that and the other, but the babies were actually being born, so boys being born with their urethra not on the end of the penis but underneath. So genital malformations in response to high levels of endocrine disruption from the stuff we're putting on our skin. Like, wow, how badly did we break it? Like, really? So cutting out those, and as Jenny was saying yesterday, it's so easy now. Neal's Yard, Tropics, they're just everywhere you go. We've got clean skincare. It's almost like inexcusable to not do it because of the pressure it's putting on your system. And finally, supplement. So adaptogens, including things like ginseng and licorice or ashwagandha and rhodiola, or the ones that we know about, that what they do, if you don't know, is if you remember that memo that's not going back to the hypothalamus and the pituitary, they switch that memo back on. So the body stops making cortisol. Stops making. I had to have some blood tests about, actually as I was waiting to be finally diagnosed as menopausal. And they were testing me for I was quite excited, a very glamorous condition called Sheehan syndrome. It's very, very rare, but apparently it looked like it could have been. So they had to take about 50 vials of blood. I'm actually not even joking, it was massive. And so he was quite upset when it was just menopause, but you know, not as upset as I was, because I was like, that is not a sexy condition to have to stand up and talk about. Thanks, universe. But I had to stop taking my adaptogens for 3 weeks before the blood test. And it was one of those things where I go, I believe in what I do. I'm sure this stuff's doing something. And then I had to stop taking them, and I went, I am not even functioning without an adaptogen. Like, wow, this stuff works. Protomorphogens, so these are desiccated glands from very happy cows, so adrenal and thyroid. And they're basically like you're bringing a temp in so that your adrenals and thyroid can go on holiday, have some sunshine and some margaritas, which means that when they come back from their holiday, they're actually ready to do their job again. Vitamin B and C, prebiotics. With a really bad gut dysbiosis and IBS, my experience is that a lot of people can't tolerate probiotics, but the prebiotics actually give us the right environment to get the probiotics out of our diet. Omega oils, because they bypass the liver, so we don't have that liver overwhelm situation. We get into every single cell, they're going to pull the excess cortisol, they're going to pull the excess sugars. Fantastic. Magnesium for every woman, everywhere, every single day. Always. Magnesium, magnesium, magnesium. It comes in lots of different forms. I tend to use malate for muscle twitching or those eye twitchings or sort of stomach conditions. Citrate if they're constipated. Glycinate thereafter, same as Michelle said yesterday. Oh no, Dr. Susan said yesterday. But magnesium is also hormone control, it's mood elevation, it's bowel function, it's blood sugar maintenance, literally everything. Zinc as well for the immune response and for the blood sugars. You can work with DAO if histamine is too high, so you can actually supplement with DAO, the enzyme, and L-glutamine for that gut healing, and it also stops sugar cravings. That is a lovely menopause survival kit. It's pretty much what I take every single day. It's a fantastic menopause survival kit. So, that's everything I have to talk to you about. You can get involved with me. So I do remote coaching packages, not just for menopause, but for IBS, also emotional trauma. My business partner and I are actually running a 4-day immersive retreat in Hampshire. We work right by the sea, it's very beautiful. And one of our specialties, because of the trauma that I've been through, there is now no human emotion that we can't be with. And love being with, and love helping people elicit their blocks and work through them. So we have a fabulous 4-day retreat in Hampshire, which is going to be great. Actually, it's loads about it on our website. It's all paleo-cated, there's yoga, there's a gong meditation, there's loads of stuff. It's going to be awesome. And then finally, this way of working with this triangle has now become a practitioner training course in functional kinesiology. So the foundation is Touch for Health, which is a globally recognized type of kinesiology, 4-week foundation course, beautiful self-development. It's so fantastic because you don't even need, massage beds. You can do Touch for Health on anyone, anywhere. And once you've got Touch for Health, then you can move on to the functional kinesiology training, which is this combination of the cutting-edge research in this hormone issue, plus functional nutrition. We also get really down deep and dirty with some of the fantastic kinesiology techniques like rebalancing the temporal mandibular joint, manipulation of the ileocecal valve, getting pelvises back in place. Fabulous, very excited about it. So yeah, you can find out more about that on our website. So if you want to connect with me, ask me any further questions that we don't get a chance to answer today, this is how you can get in contact with me. Facebook, YouTube, Balance Wellness TV is where we've got our podcast. Nick. And there's my email address. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. I've loved it.